Mark Wilson from AccuDock talking with Glenn Poutre, head coach, women's rowing at Alabama. Is it the Alabama?
The University of Alabama.
The University of Alabama. There we go. All right. And Glenn is in his second year, correct?
Just finished my second year, going into my third.
Okay. So you had one spring season under your belt? Okay. Last year's spring season was cut short, obviously, or this spring season, 2020 spring season was cut short. And we're here to talk to Glenn a little bit about how he and his team are moving forward. We all know that we've had a crazy spring, a crazy summer, but really looking for the positives and how Glenn and his coaching staff are helping his athletes to move forward in this crazy time. So thank you, Glenn, for allowing us to chat with you, and we'll chat for 15 minutes or so, and look forward to just spreading the good news about Alabama rowing and how you and your team are coping, I guess, really is what we're doing.
Yeah.
When do the kids show up to school? Because that's really the big question is,
Right. Well, we have athletes that have already started to return to campus. Mostly our international athletes were instructed to return 14 days prior to their first on-campus activity. So starting this weekend and through today, our first day of classes is August 19th. So today is the last day, really. Tomorrow probably technically would be the last day that they could be here prior to the start of classes on the 19th and make sure they're satisfying all the self-isolation quarantine requirements of the CDC coming from out of the country.
Okay.
And then the rest of the student body comes back starting the 12th. So
they'll have about a week of orientation. Is it going to be called orientation, or what? How is it being framed at your
Most
school?
orientation, they call it Bama Bound here. It was done online over the course of the summer. So what they're allowing is because they need to phase the students in to on-campus housing over a more extended period of time to allow for social distancing and safe move-in procedures. They started the move-in process, probably about 5 or 6 days earlier than they normally would. Normally, the 19th is a Wednesday. Students would start showing up the Friday before. I don't even know what date that is. Maybe it's the 15th or something like that. Anyway, they've stretched it out a little bit more just to provide space and time for people to get into their residence here on campus. And then the off-campus students is all dictated by the terms of their leases. Most of them will move in sometime around 15th.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. When do you plan on working, with the athletes? When do you get to see them, and then when do you get to work out with them or put them into some sort of training? And have you been asking them? Obviously, normal years you have a summer program and have summer conditioning, and they become in ready and raring to go, and so on in a group setting. What's the plan? What you can tell us about what's going to happen with your kids?
I mean, like all plans, it's definitely subject to change based on whatever happens, in the next week. Our tentative plan right now is going to start with COVID testing. So we won't have any group meetings in person, probably at all this semester. And most of our group meetings, when we, get the whole team together, will be virtual. The first time we'll likely see the entire team in the same place would be during our COVID testing, which is currently scheduled for the 16th. And then starting the 16th, they'll start a process of, provided they have negative test results, then they'll start a physical examination phase where they'll go through, our sports medicine staff and our team doctors to ensure that they're ready to go. If everything goes smoothly, we're kind of looking at the 24th of August as our potential first date of conditioning. We don't have any firm determination on what that means. I think most teams are doing a phased in form of conditioning. So, because they've been off for so long, they don't want us to have them come back the first day and be subjected to something that might be beyond their capability or, put them at risk for injury or
Sure.
whatever the case may be. So a lot of the timeline between us starting conditioning them is going to be based on their health. And if they're allowed to start on the 24th, then the ramp up period, so to speak, to when we can really start doing the things that we normally would do in terms of full athletic, rowing related things is, probably going to be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And that's assuming that during that time, something doesn't, something
Right.
else doesn't happen. So.
And I think a lot of people don't really realize, and it's certainly true on the NCAA side of things, certainly on the same thing on the IRA for the men's side of things, but rowing is a non-traditional fall sport. So
right.
we are sort of lucky as a sport that your NCAA season obviously is the spring season. So we've always had this non-traditional thing with the head races and other kind of events that are going on, which are really not part of your NCAA season per se, but obviously really nice for looking across at your competition. How do you think, or how are you hoping your fall season, if that's the right word, opportunities to compete, are you gonna be able to do anything? Do you think?
Well, I mean, right now, I think the focus, at least here institutionally, is on how are they going to run the fall sports. The teams that are in their championship segment right now, which is football, soccer, for us, football, soccer, volleyball, and cross country. And it's still to be determined whether the NCAA is even going to host the volleyball, soccer, and cross country championships. Football, at least in the SEC, they've devised a plan of 10 in-conference only games. They haven't come out with the schedule for that yet, but they've delayed the start of that season. So I think, at least in terms of our fall competition, provided we have somebody to race, and provided the actual sports that are in their championship segment get an opportunity to compete, we'd probably cross that bridge about competition once, those other hurdles are cleared.
And that makes perfect sense. I mean, from an athlete standpoint, we always think about the head of the Charles and the head of the Hooch and some of these other events as being really important, but really they're not. So especially when you're thinking about, your soccer team and those seniors hopefully getting any sort of a season here this fall. Yeah. So that puts it into perspective. What do you think if you guys get to be on the water at all, and that's an if, I would guess at this point, what do you hope to have if you can't have if you can't have competition outside of your program, how are you going to make it viable and make the training meaningful to your athletes?
Well, for us, our plan initially is to be running small groups of 10 to 12 athletes at a time during 2-hour blocks, and splitting the group in half and having half on the water in either roommate boats or singles, and the other half on land, supervised by coaches. So all our athletes, a lot of them.
Can I interject there? On your group of 10 or 12, is that going to be the same group throughout the season? Okay.
Well, the plan initially is for us to keep the same 10 to 12 athletes in a group, so that if we have an athlete that contracts COVID-19, we don't have to shut down the entire team. We can shut down those athletes. We can, we have a little bit more control over their contact tracing. We have a little bit more, we're able to keep people going without having a mass outbreak, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So you're basically making a family unit, you're self-identifying that family unit as 10 to 12, and then that group is kind of working together. I mean, family unit is in quotes, right? So.
Well, it totally depends on their academic schedules. Normally we would practice from 6 to 8:30 in the morning, and everybody'd be there at the same time, and you don't have any conflicts with school because they've set their schedules up accordingly. What we're looking at right now is, of our 4 coaches, taking each of the two coaches and assigning them 3 groups. And so, 6 to noon is going to be 2 coaches, and then noon to 6 is going to be another 2 coaches. So whereas we used to get our practicing done in 2 hours and 15 minutes, we're going to spend, basically as coaches, we're going to be spending 6 hours a day each, and keep the coaches consistent with the groups. Again, if we have a positive test within a group, we want to have the ability to shut down portions of the team as opposed to shutting down the entire team, or, not having to quarantine all the coaches,
Right. That makes a lot of sense. That sounds good. So inside of those groups, do you plan on having some competition within those groups to kind of see the cream rise to the top, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we have a lot of our athletes already know how to scull because we do sculling in our program. But there's still a lot of athletes that, like our rising sophomores who were walk-ons and novices, and, are coming back, and they haven't even gotten a season of competition yet, right? Because they had one race and then it was shut down. We're going to teach, they're going to be learning to scull. I mean, that in of itself is going to be, kind of something that's going to be fun for them to do, because it's a new skill. It's not, again, if we're able, we're probably going to keep the groups relatively cohesive in terms of skill level. If we can't get 10 people that are of the same level of skill, at least we can get half of the group that's at one level and another half that's at a different level, so that we're not trying to intersperse, international athletes who have been sculling for 7 years with our novices who have never been in a single, and so as coaches, we will, be able to manage those groups, hopefully a little bit better. I mean, we'll see. And, most of our freshmen live in suites of 4. So, theoretically, we could probably get some of our incoming freshman recruits in boats as big as 4s, with coxswains wearing, PPE and all that kind of stuff. But again, this is all conjecture at this point, right? Like,
it's a big unknown. Yeah. What do you think, this is kind of this is more of a personal question for you with your experience as a head coach and being in the NCAA for many, many, many years. Do you see this changing, or, either fundamentally in the short term or more long term? Do you see the sport at the collegiate level changing because of where we are right now? Or do you think it's just going to be we're going to deal with it and then we're going to go right back to what we've been doing?
Well, I mean, there's a part of me that hopes that this is just a bump in the road, right? It's we're going to navigate. It's a pretty big bump, no doubt about it. I mean, if we go over it too fast, we're going to rip the bottom out of our car, right? So, we do have to be very cautious about how we go over this bump, but I still am optimistic that it's just a bump, right? And then once we get past the bump, we can continue on down the road and, keep our eyes out for whatever that next bump is going to be. We don't know. It could be a roadblock, right? Like, depending on who you talk to, where, if we get a vaccine, right, doesn't mean we have a cure. So what is the level of risk that is going to be associated with close proximity athletics and rowing? We were designated by the NCAA as a high risk sport because of the fact that you sit in a boat in close proximity to each other, at least in a team boat, and you don't have the ability to social distance. So again, we're gonna see, right? Like we just have to read our I don't know. Do we read the news when you're able to tolerate what you're going to read? And
right.
I
know it's a big question, and I just think that nobody knows what's going to happen next. But it sounds like you and Alabama have got some plans, and you probably have plan B, C, D, going on. Or are you just going to kind of roll with it as it comes?
I mean, I think we're trying not to roll with it. I mean, I think we're going to have to, right? But I think what we're hoping is, or at least what we're preparing our athletes for is being resilient and dealing with the unprecedented.
Yeah.
As our university begins to reopen and with a hybrid model of instruction that's some in person, some online, and we have these students coming back, I think the big question is going to be not necessarily what protocols the university puts in place to keep athletes safe and students safe, what protocols the athletic department puts in place to keep people safe. It's going to be how safe do the students keep themselves when they're not being controlled by the protocols that the institution and the athletic department have mandated. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head there. We can only be as safe as we want to be. So, and there's a lot of time in the day where you're not being, like you said, controlled by a department or, protocols that you have to choose what you do when you're out in public. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all experiencing this, when and I don't know how it is in DeLand for you right now, but, for instance, here in Tuscaloosa, we're supposed to be mandatory face coverings when inside any public place, and that means all merchants are supposed to be enforcing, face coverings for every person that goes into their establishments. And, with the exception of if they're eating or drinking and that's not possible to do. And again, I am hopeful that more people will take this seriously because, regardless of, without getting, you can edit this out, Mark, if you want, but regardless of what your political leanings are, the reality is that, COVID-19 is a real thing and people are getting sick and people are dying, and face coverings have been demonstrated to show that they provide a level of protection, not complete protection, but it's just like anything else. Hand washing and all those other things that we've been told to do to help prevent the spread are still really valuable. So how do we get through to the people that are around us that we're dependent on them for us to stay healthy? And I don't want to say get more people to take it seriously, but certainly the people that are going to be here on this campus to be a little less cavalier with their health and
Sure,
a little bit more concerned about the health of others.
Right. I've got one more question for you, and this kind of is this new bit that's going on this year within the rowing community and every other sport. Well, not every sport, but a lot of sports, is the whole fact of virtual competition. What is and this, I know NCAA has certain eligibility issues. They've got guidelines on that sort of thing from the past, but moving forward, what's your take on just simply like the head of the Charles is going to be virtual this year, 4,720 meters or something, and you can do it on an erg, on the water, whatever. And what's your take on the virtual?
I mean, I think it's great. I had some athletes that participated in some of those virtual erg challenges this summer, and and they had a lot of fun with it. I think doing it on the erg is definitely harder than finding ways to incorporate doing it on the water, because ultimately rowers want to compare themselves to each other on the water as opposed to the erg. I mean, once we get through the particulars of what it's going to look like and whether or not it's, for instance, we don't necessarily want it to count as a competition for us because there's a whole bunch of other triggers that take place when we compete for the first time. But if there's a way for our athletes to, do it, unaffiliated or voluntarily, and us provide them with the opportunity to get a result that they can post and compare, we'll certainly participate in that respect, because we're going to do those things in practice anyways. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going to do time trials over varying distances in the fall because that's what we've always done. We got people that are pretty good in the single, we got people that aren't very good in the single, and the only way they're going to determine or see whether or not they're progressing is by us giving them opportunities to test where they are, right? I mean,
Yep.
so, like we got a lot of ideas, it all depends on what we're able to do and, to what extent we can, we don't have enough singles to put everybody out in a single. We'd love to, but one, we don't have as many as we even would have planned on having this year. And because of, COVID budgets and uncertainty, we're not in a position where we can, drop 20 grand on 4 more boats, which is what we'd love to do at this point. So
and if Alabama can't do it, geez, there's problems then, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the college model is definitely, the whole college sports model is, I don't want to say under attack, but it's definitely under scrutiny right now, right? And, we'll definitely see in the coming days, in the coming months, like what changes happen, right? Because there is definitely going to be things that change. And I just hope that the change isn't, or the solution that they come to is a reduction or an elimination of collegiate athletics because, they can't come to some way to rectify, I don't want to say inequities, but the discrepancies between revenue that is being generated and, the financial expense being transferred to the people who are generating the revenue. Sure. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to say it. So, Glenn, I think this has been great. What we'd like to do is maybe come back and revisit you in maybe 2 months or maybe 6 weeks, something like that, just to see how things are going. So we're kind of taking this model with our little vlog here as something that we want to, get people's input now, and then come back and just see how things are going and see, how the plans have shaped out and stuff. So hopefully we will talk to you again in a few weeks.
That'd be great, man.
Okay.
Great seeing you as always.
Great to see you, Glenn. Good luck with everything at Alabama, and thanks again for joining us.
All right, Appreciate Roll Tide.
Okay, Roll Tide. Bye.